Hello everyone. This is a true story shared anonymously. If you find this story meaningful, please support me by liking, subscribing, and sharing. It really helps me a lot. They say the early years of marriage are the honeymoon phase, a time of blissful ignorance and unwavering adoration. For Sarah and me, it was more than just a phase. It felt like the foundation of forever. I remember the day we met like it was yesterday, even though 15 years have blurred many other details of my life. She walked into the coffee shop where I was working, a whirlwind of sunshine and laughter. Her hair, the color of warm honey, cascaded down her shoulders, framing a face that could launch 1,000 ships, as they say. But it wasn't just her beauty that captivated me, it was the way she looked at the world, with an infectious optimism and a spark of mischief in her eyes. We talked for hours that day about everything and nothing, and I knew, with a certainty that surprised even myself, that my life had just taken an irreversible, wonderful turn. Our courtship was a fairy tale. Romantic dinners under starry skies, spontaneous weekend trips to the coast, long walks hand in hand through autumn leaves. Every moment felt charged with an electric energy, a feeling that we were meant to be, two halves of a whole finally finding each other. When I proposed, on a mountaintop overlooking a breathtaking vista, she cried, and I knew those tears were of pure, unadulterated joy. Our wedding was everything we had dreamed of, small, intimate, surrounded by our closest family and friends, filled with love and laughter that echoed through the vineyards where we exchanged vows. Looking back at the photos now, it's like looking at pictures of different people, versions of ourselves untouched by the harsh realities that life can sometimes throw our way. We were young, vibrant, and utterly, completely in love. The first few years of our marriage were a seamless extension of that fairy tale. We bought a small house in the suburbs, a fixer-upper that we lovingly transformed into our home, painting walls together, planting flowers in the garden, filling it with the sounds of our shared laughter and dreams. We built a life together, brick by brick, filled with shared passions and mutual respect. We loved to cook together, experimenting with new recipes, often ending up in fits of giggles as we made a mess in the kitchen. Saturday mornings were for lazy breakfasts in bed, reading the newspaper and planning our day. Evenings were spent curled up on the couch, watching movies or simply talking, sharing the mundane details of our days and the deeper desires of our hearts. We were best friends, lovers, partners in every sense of the word. We supported each other's careers, celebrated each other's successes, and held each other up during moments of doubt and failure. There was a deep-seated trust between us, a silent understanding that we were in this together, for better or for worse. We traveled, explored new cultures, tasted exotic foods, and made memories that we promised to cherish forever. I remember a trip to Italy, where we wandered through ancient ruins, tossed coins in the Trevi fountain, and shared gelato under the Tuscan sun. Sarah had this incredible ability to find joy in the simplest things. The smell of rain after a long dry spell, the vibrant colors of a sunset, the warmth of a stranger's smile. She was my anchor, my sunshine, the very air that I breathed. People used to tell us we were the perfect couple, and honestly, sometimes, it felt like we were living in a movie. We were envied, admired, and most importantly, we were deeply, genuinely happy. Or so I thought. Looking back, the first subtle shifts were almost imperceptible, like the faintest tremor before an earthquake. They were so small, so easily dismissed, that I barely registered them at the time. Maybe it was a little less laughter in her voice, a slightly shorter hug in the morning, a tendency to be lost in her own thoughts during our quiet evenings together. She started spending more time on her phone, a new habit that seemed to emerge out of nowhere. At first, I didn't think much of it. Everyone is glued to their phones these days, right? But it was different with Sarah. She used to be so present, so engaged in our conversations, so eager to disconnect from the digital world when we were together. Now, she would often be scrolling through social media, a faint smile playing on her lips, but her eyes distant, her mind seemingly somewhere else. There were changes in our intimacy too. Not drastic, not overnight, but a gradual cooling, a subtle withdrawal. Our once passionate embraces became perfunctory, our intimate moments less frequent, less filled with the spark that had always defined our physical connection. When I tried to initiate intimacy, she would sometimes seem distracted or tired or simply not in the mood. Again, I rationalized it. Life gets busy. Stress at work. Everyone goes through phases like this in a long-term relationship, don't they? I told myself it was just a temporary lull, a natural ebb and flow in the tides of our marriage. I was so invested in maintaining the image of our perfect life, so afraid to acknowledge any cracks in the facade, that I willingly blinded myself to the warning signs that were starting to flicker around me. Another subtle change was her increased secrecy about her schedule. She used to be an open book, sharing every detail of her day from her work meetings to her lunch plans with friends. Now she became vaguer, less forthcoming. When I asked about her day, her answers became shorter, more generic. Just work stuff, she'd say, or nothing much, just errands. If I pressed further, she would become slightly irritable, accusing me of being nosy or controlling. I backed off, not wanting to start an argument, not wanting to rock the boat. I told myself it was just her needing a little more space, a little more independence. After all, we had been together for so long, maybe she just needed to rediscover her own identity outside of our marriage. It was a comforting narrative, one that allowed me to maintain my blissful ignorance, to avoid confronting the uncomfortable feeling that was starting to gnaw at the edges of my heart. There were also little things, almost insignificant in themselves, but when viewed in retrospect they became glaring red flags. A new perfume, one I hadn't bought for her, a fragrance that lingered faintly in the air when she came home from work. A sudden interest in dressing up more, even for mundane errands, a noticeable effort in her appearance that seemed to go beyond her usual effortless style. Late nights at work became more frequent, business trips that seemed to pop up unexpectedly. Each instance, on its own, could be explained away, rationalized, dismissed as coincidence. But cumulatively, they formed a pattern, a subtle shift in the landscape of our marriage that I was choosing to ignore, burying my head in the sand like an ostrich, desperately clinging to the illusion of our perfect, unbreakable love. I was so deeply in love with the Sarah I knew, the Sarah I believed her to be, that I refused to even consider the possibility that she might be changing, that something might be amiss. I was living in a fool's paradise, blissfully unaware that the paradise was about to crumble around me. Have you ever felt this way, so sure of something, so invested in a belief, that you ignore the whispers of doubt, the subtle signs that something is not quite right? The whispers of doubt, initially faint and easily dismissed, began to grow louder, more insistent, like a persistent hum that you can no longer ignore. The subtle changes that I had rationalized away started to coalesce into a nagging unease, a disquieting feeling that something was fundamentally wrong. The late nights at work became almost routine, stretching into the late hours, sometimes until well past midnight. When I questioned her about it, her explanations were vague and evasive. A big project, she'd say, or deadlines are tight. But when I asked for specifics, she would deflect, change the subject, or accuse me of being distrustful. Her defensiveness in itself became a red flag. The Sarah I knew would have been open, communicative, willing to share the details of her day. This new Sarah was guarded, secretive, and increasingly distant. The phone became a constant source of friction. She guarded it fiercely, always keeping it face down, never leaving it unattended. She changed her password, something she had never done before. When I walked into a room, she would often quickly minimize or close whatever was on her screen. It was as if she was hiding something she desperately didn't want me to see. My mind started to race, conjuring up worst-case scenarios, fueled by the growing sense of unease that was now a constant companion. I tried to push these thoughts away, to tell myself I was being paranoid, that I was letting my insecurities get the better of me. But the feeling persisted, a cold knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. One evening, Sarah said she had to work late again. It was a Friday night, and we had made plans for dinner at our favorite restaurant. She apologized, saying a last-minute client meeting had come up, and she wouldn't be home until late. I tried to hide my disappointment, to be understanding, but a seed of suspicion had already been planted. As she got ready to leave, I noticed her outfit. It was more dressed up than usual for a client meeting. A sleek black dress, high heels, and jewelry, it looked more like she was going out for a romantic dinner than a business meeting. My heart sank. The rationalizations I had been clinging to started to crumble, replaced by a growing sense of dread. After she left, I found myself unable to settle down. The silence in the house felt heavy, suffocating. I paced around, restless and agitated, the suspicion gnawing at me. I knew I shouldn't, but the temptation to look through her phone was overwhelming. It felt like a betrayal of trust, a violation of her privacy, but the need to know, to find some answers, was stronger than my conscience. I waited until I was sure she was gone, then I went to her nightstand where she usually left her phone charging. It wasn't there. Panic flared. Where was it? I checked her purse, the bathroom, the kitchen counter. Finally, I found it in her car, plugged into the charger. It was locked, of course. I tried guessing her new password, but no luck. Defeated, I slumped back into the house, the knot in my stomach tightening even further. The next day, the suspicion was still there, festering, refusing to be ignored. I decided to do something I had never considered before. I decided to follow her. It felt wrong, invasive, but I was desperate for the truth. I knew her work schedule, I knew where her office was. I told myself I would just drive by, just to see if her car was there, just to reassure myself that she was actually working late. I waited until she left for work, then I followed her, keeping a safe distance, my heart pounding in my chest. She drove to her office building, parked, and went inside. Relief washed over me. See, I was being paranoid. She was just working late. But something still didn't feel right. Why the secrecy? Why the defensiveness? I decided to wait a little longer just to be sure. I parked my car a block away, where I could see the entrance to her office building. Hours passed. The sun began to set. People started leaving the building, heading home for the weekend. Still no Sarah. Doubt crept back in stronger than ever. Then around 8 p.m. I saw her emerge from the building. But she wasn't alone. She was with a man. They were laughing, talking animatedly, walking close together, their shoulders brushing. It wasn't just a colleague, it was different. There was an intimacy in their body language, a closeness that sent a jolt of ice through my veins. They walked to a nearby restaurant hand in hand. Hand in hand. The words echoed in my mind, a deafening roar that drowned out all other thoughts. I watched them go into the restaurant, my heart pounding, my hands shaking. I felt sick to my stomach, a wave of nausea rising in my throat. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't real. But it was. I sat in my car, paralyzed, watching the restaurant, my mind reeling. Should I go in? Should I confront them? Should I just drive away and pretend I hadn't seen anything? The internal conflict was tearing me apart. Fear battled with anger, denial fought with the undeniable truth unfolding before my eyes. I felt like I was watching a movie, a terrible, heartbreaking movie, and I was trapped in the audience, unable to intervene, unable to stop the unfolding tragedy. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged from the restaurant. They were still holding hands, still laughing, still lost in their own world. They walked to a car parked across the street, not Sarah's car, a different car, a sleek, expensive-looking sedan. They got in and the car drove away. I followed, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. They drove to a hotel, a discreet, upscale hotel on the outskirts of town. They parked, got out, and walked into the hotel, still hand in hand. The doors closed behind them and my world shattered. The truth, the painful, undeniable truth, crashed down on me like a tidal wave. It wasn't just late nights at work, it wasn't just a new perfume, it wasn't just a phase. She was having an affair. My wife, the woman I loved, the woman I trusted, was cheating on me. The woman I had built my life with, the woman I had promised forever to, was betraying me in the most profound and devastating way imaginable. The pain was physical, a crushing weight on my chest, a burning ache in my throat. Tears streamed down my face, hot and bitter. I felt like I had been punched in the gut, winded, unable to breathe. The world around me seemed to blur, to lose focus, as if reality itself was dissolving. If you were in my shoes, what would you do? What would you feel? The hotel doors closing behind them felt like the final nail in the coffin of my marriage, of my trust, of my entire world as I knew it. Sitting in my car, parked across the street from that anonymous upscale hotel, I felt utterly numb. The initial shock had given way to a chilling emptiness, a void where my heart used to be. The tears had stopped, replaced by a dry, hollow ache. I couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't even feel properly. It was like my emotions had short-circuited, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the betrayal. The image of Sarah, hand in hand with another man, kept flashing in my mind, a cruel, relentless loop. It was like a physical wound, raw and exposed, throbbing with pain. 15 years. 15 years of love, of trust, of shared dreams, all reduced to this, a clandestine rendezvous in a hotel room with a stranger. The memories of our beautiful years together, the laughter, the intimacy, the promises we had made, now felt tainted, poisoned by this revelation. Were they all lies? Had she been faking it all along? The questions swirled in my mind, unanswered, unanswerable, each one a fresh stab of pain. Anger started to simmer beneath the numbness, a slow, burning rage that threatened to consume me. Anger at Sarah for her deceit, for her betrayal, for shattering everything we had built together. Anger at myself for being so blind, so naive, for trusting her so completely, for ignoring the warning signs that were now so painfully obvious in retrospect. Anger at the man, this faceless stranger who had invaded my life, who had stolen my wife, who had become the instrument of my heartbreak. The anger was hot, volatile, demanding action, demanding retribution. But what could I do? What should I do? The internal conflict raged within me. Confrontation was the obvious answer, the instinctive reaction. I wanted to storm into that hotel room, to rip them apart, to demand answers, to unleash my fury. But a part of me recoiled at the thought. What would that achieve? Would it undo the pain? Would it restore my trust? Would it bring back the Sarah I thought I knew? No. Confrontation in that moment felt futile, even pathetic. It would be a messy public spectacle, a scene that would only amplify my humiliation and pain. Silence was another option, a cowardly option, perhaps, but an option nonetheless. I could pretend I didn't know, bury my head in the sand again, and try to salvage what was left of my marriage. Maybe it was a mistake, a one-time lapse in judgment. Maybe she would come to her senses, regret her actions, and come back to me begging for forgiveness. The thought was tempting, a desperate grasp at a fading hope. But deep down I knew it was a delusion. The trust was broken, irrevocably shattered. Could I ever look at her again without seeing the image of her hand in hand with another man? Could I ever believe anything she said again? Silence, while avoiding immediate confrontation, felt like a slow, agonizing form of self-torture. Revenge flickered through my mind, a dark, seductive impulse. The idea of inflicting pain on them, of making them suffer as I was suffering, was momentarily appealing. Should I expose them? Should I ruin his life as she had ruined mine? Should I seek out my own form of infidelity, to even the score, to prove that I was just as capable of betrayal? The thoughts were dark, twisted, born out of pain and anger. But even in my darkest moments, I knew that revenge was a hollow victory, a path that would only lead to more pain and bitterness. It wouldn't heal my wounds, it would only deepen them. As I sat there, wrestling with these conflicting emotions, a strange sense of detachment started to creep in. It was like I was observing myself from a distance, watching my own life unravel in slow motion. The pain was still there, but it was becoming less acute, more diffused. Maybe it was emotional exhaustion, maybe it was the first stage of acceptance, I didn't know. But the frantic energy of anger and despair started to subside, replaced by a weary resignation. I decided to go home. Not to confront her, not to make a scene, not to do anything rash. Just to go home, to my empty house, to the ruins of my shattered life. I drove back in a daze, the city lights blurring around me, the radio playing softly, unnoticed. When I got home, the house felt cold, sterile, devoid of warmth and life. It was just a house, no longer a home. I walked through the rooms, each one filled with memories, each memory now tainted by betrayal. The kitchen where we cooked together, the living room where we curled up on the couch, the bedroom where we shared our most intimate moments. All of them now felt like scenes from a ghost story, haunted by the specter of infidelity. I went into our bedroom, the room that was once our sanctuary, our haven of love and intimacy. Her side of the bed was empty, untouched. Her clothes were still in the closet, her perfume still on the dresser. Everything was as it should be on the surface, but underneath, everything was broken, irrevocably damaged. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring blankly ahead, the weight of my grief pressing down on me. The emotional dam finally broke, and the tears started to flow again, this time not just tears of pain and anger, but tears of profound sadness, of loss, of mourning for the life I had lost, for the love I had believed in, for the future that had just been stolen from me. Have you ever experienced such a deep emotional breakdown, where it feels like your entire being is collapsing inwards? Sarah came home late the next morning around noon. I had barely slept, spending the night tossing and turning, haunted by nightmares and waking up to the cold, stark reality of my situation. When I heard her key in the lock, my heart started to pound again, a mixture of apprehension and anger surging through me. I had decided to confront her, not in a fit of rage but with a cold, calm resolve. I needed answers, I needed to understand, and I needed to decide what to do next. She walked in looking tired and slightly disheveled, but otherwise seemingly unfazed. "Hey," she said, her voice casual as if nothing was amiss. "Sorry I was out so late last night." The meeting ran longer than expected. The lie hung in the air between us, thick and suffocating. I looked at her, my gaze steady, unwavering. "Don't," I said, my voice low and controlled. "Don't lie to me anymore, Sarah." "I know." Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise, then quickly masked by a defensive hardness. "Know what?" she asked, her voice sharp, challenging. "Know that you were at a hotel last night?" I replied, my voice still calm but edged with steel. "With another man." The words hung in the air, heavy with accusation and pain. Silence descended, thick and heavy, broken only by the sound of our breathing. Her initial defensiveness crumbled, replaced by a look of shock, then a wave of emotions, guilt, fear, and a strange, defiant anger. How did you know?" she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "It doesn't matter how I know," I said, my voice still even. What matters is that it's true, isn't it? She didn't answer, her eyes darting away, avoiding my gaze. Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. The denial had failed, the truth was out in the open, raw and exposed. Who is he? I asked, the question heavy with unspoken pain. She hesitated, then finally mumbled, just someone from work. Someone from work? I repeated, my voice laced with disbelief. Is that all he is to you, Sarah? Just someone from work? Tears welled up in her eyes, but there was no remorse in her gaze, only a strange mixture of defiance and self-pity. It just happened, she said, her voice trembling slightly. It wasn't planned. It just happened. The cliché, the pathetic excuse stung more than any outright denial. It just happened? I echoed, my voice rising slightly, the calm facade starting to crack. You spent the night with another man and it just happened? She started to cry, the tears flowing freely now, but they felt hollow, insincere. I'm sorry, she sobbed, her voice choked with emotion. I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't want to hurt you. But you did hurt me, Sarah, I said, my voice breaking for the first time. You shattered everything. Everything I believed in, everything we built together. You ripped my heart out and stomped on it. The anger, the pain, the betrayal, all welled up inside me, threatening to explode. Why? I asked, the question raw, desperate, pleading for an explanation, any explanation that could make sense of this senseless devastation. Why did you do it? She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears, but also with a strange kind of emptiness. I don't know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I haven't been happy for a while. I felt suffocated, like something was missing. Suffocated? I repeated, incredulous. Missing? We had everything, Sarah. We had love, we had trust, we had a beautiful life together. What was missing? She couldn't answer or wouldn't. She just stood there, sobbing, her face buried in her hands. The confrontation, the emotional outburst, felt anticlimactic, unsatisfying. There were no grand revelations, no dramatic confessions, just hollow excuses and empty tears. The truth was out, but it didn't bring clarity, it only deepened the pain and confusion. The breaking point had arrived. The moment of decision. Leave, stay, or revenge. The options swirled in my mind, each one fraught with pain and uncertainty. Staying felt impossible, unthinkable. How could I stay with a woman who had betrayed me so deeply, who had shattered my trust so completely? The thought of living with her, of sharing a bed, a house, a life, filled me with revulsion. The image of her with another man was burned into my mind, a constant reminder of her infidelity. Staying would be a slow, agonizing form of self-destruction, a constant living hell of resentment and mistrust. Revenge still flickered in the back of my mind, the dark impulse to inflict pain, to make her suffer as I was suffering. But the brief allure of revenge had faded, replaced by a weary sense of resignation. Revenge wouldn't heal my wounds, it wouldn't bring back what I had lost, it would only drag me down to her level, into the mire of bitterness and negativity. It was a path of darkness, and I knew deep down that I didn't want to walk it. Leaving then seemed like the only viable option, the only path towards healing, towards reclaiming my life. It would be painful, devastatingly painful, but it was the only way to escape the suffocating weight of betrayal, to create space for healing and rebuilding. It was the hardest decision I had ever made, but also the clearest, the most necessary. It's over, Sarah, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. I want you to leave. I want you to leave now. She looked up, her eyes wide with shock and disbelief. Leave? She whispered. You want me to leave? Yes, I said, my voice firm, unwavering. It's over. I can't do this anymore. I can't be married to someone I can't trust, someone who has betrayed me so completely. It's over. What would you have decided in that moment? Was leaving the only option? The days and weeks that followed were a blur of pain, confusion, and a slow, arduous journey towards healing. Sarah left, not without protest, not without tears and pleas for forgiveness, but she left. The house felt empty, eerily silent, haunted by the ghost of our past. Every corner, every object, every photograph was a painful reminder of what we had lost, of what I had lost. The initial shock gave way to a deep, gnawing sadness, a profound sense of grief for the death of my marriage, for the loss of my dreams, for the shattering of my trust. The emotional pain was intense, almost unbearable at times. There were days when I could barely get out of bed, days when the simplest tasks felt like insurmountable mountains. Sleep was elusive, nightmares plagued my nights, and waking up was a daily reminder of the reality I was now facing. Eating was a chore, food tasted like ash in my mouth, and my body felt weak and depleted. I was a shadow of my former self, lost in a fog of grief and despair. Seeking support became crucial. I reached out to my family, to my closest friends, and confided in them about what had happened. Their love, their support, their unwavering presence became my lifeline. They listened, they offered comfort, they provided a safe space for me to vent my emotions, to cry, to rage, to grieve. They reminded me of my worth, of my strength, of my resilience. Without them, I don't know if I would have made it through those darkest days. Therapy was another essential step in my healing journey. Talking to a professional, someone who could provide objective guidance and support, was incredibly helpful. My therapist helped me process my emotions, understand the complexities of betrayal, and develop coping mechanisms for dealing with the pain and trauma. She helped me navigate the labyrinth of grief, anger, and confusion, and gradually, slowly started to piece myself back together. The healing process was not linear. There were good days and bad days, moments of progress and moments of setbacks. There were times when I felt like I was finally moving forward, and times when the pain would resurface with renewed intensity, dragging me back into the depths of despair. But with each passing day, the bad days became less frequent, the good days more sustained. Slowly, imperceptibly, the fog of grief began to lift, replaced by glimpses of clarity and hope. Looking back, I can see the early warning signs more clearly now. The subtle shifts in Sarah's behavior, the changes in our intimacy, the increased secrecy, the defensiveness, they were all there, if only I had been willing to see them, to acknowledge them, to confront them. But I was so invested in maintaining the illusion of our perfect marriage, so afraid of facing the truth, that I blinded myself to the reality unfolding around me. Lesson learned: trust your instincts, pay attention to the subtle shifts, and don't be afraid to confront uncomfortable truths. The experience of infidelity has changed me irrevocably. It has shattered my naivety, stripped away my illusions, and forced me to confront the darker aspects of human nature. But it has also made me stronger, more resilient, and more self-aware. I have learned the importance of self-love, self-respect, and self-reliance. I have learned that trust is precious, fragile, and easily broken. And I have learned that even in the face of unimaginable pain, healing is possible and life can go on. The future is still uncertain, and the scars of betrayal will likely remain with me for a long time. But I am no longer defined by my past, by my pain, by my heartbreak. I am moving forward, step by step, day by day, towards a future that is still unwritten but full of potential. I am rebuilding my life, not from scratch, but from the ruins of what was lost, stronger, wiser, and more resilient than before. The journey is far from over, but I am no longer lost in the darkness. I am walking towards the light, towards hope, towards healing, towards a future where love and trust are not just ideals, but realities, built on honesty, vulnerability, and mutual respect. Thank you for listening to my story. It has been a long and painful journey, but sharing it has been cathartic, a step towards further healing. Do you have a story to share? Leave a comment or send it to me. Who knows? Your story might help someone out there who is going through a similar struggle, someone who needs to know that they are not alone, that healing is possible, and that even after the darkest night, the sun will rise again. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share if this story resonated with you. It truly helps support this channel and allows me to continue sharing stories of resilience and healing. Take care, and remember, you are not alone.